statewide preliminary injunction halting the Biden administration's ban on the oil lease sales on public lands. This is a major win for workers in oil and industry and consumers who have felt pain at the pump. Joining us to discuss is Louisiana Attorney General Jeff Landry. AG, good to see you. Thanks so much for coming on. Kind of explain this to us if you can. What does this preliminary injunction do, specifically in your state of Louisiana?
So basically what happened was that the president at the very early stages of the administration issued basically a constructive moratorium, we call it, basically blocking all new leases on federal lands for oil and gas activity. We went into court and said that he was stepping outside of his authority. We got a federal judge here in Louisiana to agree, and thereby basically ordering the administration to go back through the process and begin leasing federal lands again to oil and gas companies, in essence, starting the process over again. What the president and them were trying to do was basically put a pause on it, a permanent pause that would disrupt the industry such that it would basically take years for the industry to catch up to where it was before.
How long will this last, do you think? Will there be pushback on this?
Well, I'm sure there'll be some pushback. What's disappointing is that this administration is crushing the poor and the middle class in their pocketbooks in high energy prices. We have seen the price of gas rise since the president got sworn in, and basically hurting those people at the pump. It's costing American families money in their budgets. Again, at a time when we're finally getting back to vacation, it's driving season again, and we're feeling that pain at the pump.
Let me ask you about this. Another topic here, Supreme Court ruling, 7-2 vote that 18 states, 2 individuals do not have the legal standing required to bring a suit aimed to dismantle the Affordable Care Act, also known notably as Obamacare, keeping it in place. There was a lot of write-ups for you, NOLA.com, pushing against you, saying, sorry, Obamacare is here to stay. How do you answer that?
Well, look, it's certainly disappointing that the Supreme Court now twice in the last 6 months has basically said that states, when a state has a dispute with another state or the federal government, does not have standing in front of the Supreme Court. That's extremely troubling. I think that Justice Alito pointed that out in his dissent. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court doesn't give us an answer. Whether Obamacare is here to stay or not, if it's unconstitutional, it shouldn't stand. And the Supreme Court should be answering whether or not, in its current form, it's constitutional or not. It basically causes the American people not to know what's going on with their health care. We know that Obamacare has greatly increased the price of health insurance. It was supposed to make health insurance affordable, and it hasn't done that. And so I guess for right now, we're stuck with this devastating policy.
But you use that term, for right now. Do you think there would be another forward push, perhaps a different avenue for that?
Well, it's interesting because what the Supreme Court did was not get to the answer and just said states don't have standing. Right. Some party actually does have standing. And so the question is whether that party, the party that the court believes has standing to ask those questions, will take a case to the court.
All right, we'll leave it right there. By the way, happy belated Father's Day to you, and we appreciate you coming on and taking the time. That's Jeff Landry there, AG in Louisiana. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Still ahead today, and former President Trump had a special message to the nation.
It's very special. It's very heartfelt. Trump released a statement writing, quote, "Happy Father's Day to all, including the radical left, rhinos, and other losers of the world. Hopefully, eventually, everyone will come together," end quote. Again, very heartfelt.
I know. I think a lot of people got a good laugh about that. Again, we had teased it as classic Trump. Yeah. Kind of interesting to compare it to President Biden, who also tweeted out a message for the day saying, "Happy Father's Day to the fathers, stepfathers, grandfathers, and father figures who enrich our character, love us unconditionally, and give so much of themselves every day so we can live lives worthy of their dreams and sacrifices."
Very interesting, and a lot of look at that the tweet: father, stepfather, grandfather, father. What happened to birthing people? Are they still using that one, or is that still a part of the conversation?
Strictly for mothers, Sean. Strictly for mothers.
That's what I wondered.
At least in the budget.
Very concerning as to what vocabulary we use. But either way, the Trump statement got a lot of folks talking. Don't be surprised. This is how he's always been. It is classic Trump, and him wishing Father's Day to everyone, including all the losers out there.
It's just not in the tweet form. It was released from the official
well, he
statement.
can't tweet
there.
yet, although they talk about this social media platform that is supposed to come out. We don't know what it's called. We don't know when it's coming out, but apparently this will be one that the 45th President of the United States will and others will be allowed to speak on. And we wonder what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I think if people expected Donald Trump to stop talking, they're wrongly mistaken there, because again, he's got access to issue statements, and guess what, those end up on Twitter all the time, so people are knowing what he's saying. And he's weighed in most recently on foreign policy issues when we saw President Biden going abroad, attend the G7, NATO, meeting with Putin, Donald Trump weighing in on that as well. He also weighs in on, of course, midterm elections and candidates that he's endorsing, and of course the ongoing border crisis. So it's no surprise exactly what the former president is thinking. It just depends what platform
and that's the thing which we're talking about, the border crisis. He already talked about it. He's going to go ahead and visit the border, I believe, June 30th.
Yes.
He's going to join Governor Greg Abbott there in Texas. So many have called on Vice President Kamala Harris to go ahead and do, what she has not done. She's been to Guatemala. Yes, she's been to Mexico City. But the actual crisis that's happening at our border, she has not been there yet. And that's what prompted, I think it was 50 Republicans to push back on that, to have her step down as, quote, border czar. Will that make moves? Is it another political move? Obviously, that'll wait to be seen, but that's something that we'll break down for you on this broadcast and continue to research into it later in the week. All right, also this. Up next, the COVID vaccines have been around for event next month's games there. Correspondent Phoebe Amoroso live in Tokyo with the latest on this. Phoebe, thanks for coming on. What else did they announce? Why so close to the games to make this announcement?
This decision has been fairly controversial. Just last Friday, a top COVID-19 advisor to the government and 25 other medical experts gave a report saying that the games without spectators is the best option. But the organizers have pointed to international events and even domestic events that are going on with spectators and said that they could go ahead. They have said there is a proviso, however, that if the COVID-19 infection situation worsens in Japan, they will reduce that number further, and they did not take the no spectator option off the table. They also said that stakeholders are not included in the capacity, and they're still deciding on how many to allow in for the opening ceremony. There were reports of 20,000 for the opener, but that's still yet to be confirmed.
Still concerns over this new Delta variant and other issues, perhaps parts of the country that don't have access to vaccines, and maybe they travel into this region. How is the general public feeling about this decision to allow 10,000 spectators, which I believe is 50% capacity there?
So there are serious concerns over the Olympics. A recent poll by Kyodo News shows that 86% of people fear a rebound in cases after the Games. And all this news comes as 9 members of the Ugandan Olympic team arrived in Japan on Saturday. They're only the second team to arrive for training, and 1 member tested positive for COVID-19. Apparently, they all gave negative tests before flying, and they had been vaccinated with AstraZeneca. So it's unclear how this happened, but that's really fueling concerns that the Olympics could be a super spreader event. And other regional governments are calling on the central government to make sure Japan does not face a 5th wave. That is a concern.
Well, I will tell you, we did have a Super Bowl here in Tampa, Florida, and it was not a super spreader. So hopefully the good news would continue out there. We appreciate that. Phoebe Amoroso, thank you so much. It's Monday. A lot of folks playing catch up. I know you've got the latest.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Sean. Well, here's a look at some stories making headlines right now. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis managed to outpoint former President Donald Trump in a 2024 straw poll conducted at the Western Conservative Summit. Now, the poll used an approval method which allowed participants multiple candidates from a wide range of 2024 GOP prospects. Now, DeSantis managed to poll at 74% approval compared to 71% of former President President Trump. And Iran's Seoul nuclear power plant has undergone an emergency shutdown, with electric company officials predicting it will last for 3 to 4 days. And now it's the first emergency shutdown reported at the plant since it went online in 2011 with help from Russia. Now, the emergency shutdown comes as top diplomats from both the U.S. and Iran continue negotiations on a possible return to the Iran nuclear deal. And finally, Secretary of State Anthony Blinken is calling out China for acting increasingly adversarial. Now that the Chinese Communist government is acting more aggressively abroad, Blinken adds that the U.S. and its allies should not look to contain China, but instead to uphold rules-based order that China opposes. Now, those are just some of the stories we're following right now. But for breaking news, head on over to newsmax.com. Sean.
All right, Alex, check in with you in just a bit. Republicans and Democrats has been gaining traction in the Senate. Now, the bill proposes only a quarter, though, of the spending in the plan originally proposed by President Biden. It would not raise income taxes, but a few stumbling blocks, they do remain.
Part of the proposal was raising the federal gas tax to pay for the plan. It hasn't been raised since 1993, but progressives are not on board with that means of raising revenue.
Let's talk about it with our panelists. Today we have Amy Tarkanian, Republican strategist and former chair of the Nevada State Republican Party. We also have Ruth Edmonds, Ohio congressional candidate and former president of the Columbus NAACP, and Tom Borelli, contributor with Real America's Voice and Newsmax Insider. Thanks everyone for taking the time on this Monday. Maybe we're going to get right through it together here. Let's start with the 10 Democrats who signed on to this bill. Some say they're at risk of losing. The progressives on this, especially on that tax issue. We'll play this. This is Senator Bernie Sanders on Meet the Press. Here's what he said yesterday.
One of the concerns that I do have about the bipartisan bill is how they are going to pay for their proposals. And they're not clear yet. I don't know that they even know yet. But some of the speculation is raising a gas tax, which I don't support.
So there's that. And President Biden has said he's also not in favor of raising that gas tax. But how do you get this done when it seems like everyone's on a different side of this? Ruth, I'll start with you.
In the federal spending at the moment, having this gas tax, using a gas tax to increase for infrastructure is not the appropriate way to resolve this problem. I do believe that we need to continue to improve our infrastructure, but we've got to find sensible ways in order to do that. And we don't want to hurt families in the meantime. And so when I'm in Congress, I'm certainly going to work to find sensible ways that we can reduce the amount of spending that we are doing on our infrastructure and yet still continue to improve the infrastructure that we have because it's necessary and important.
There are clearly some concerns about this infrastructure bill. Again, it's a fraction of what was originally proposed, and we've already heard from Democrats who are speaking out against it. The bill, however, is headed to the White House. It's going to land on President Biden's desk later today. Amy, do you see this bipartisan approach being successful, or will it be rejected again because you hear the complaints from one side of the aisle?
Well, I think there are still some major concerns. I think the one way that we could approach this as possibly spending is if we actually stuck to infrastructure itself. You've got Bernie Sanders. While I do agree with him that we should not raise the gas tax because out here on the West Coast, it's ridiculous. I just filled up my daughter's car. She's a teenager, 25 gallons. It was at the lowest price that we could find in the area in Oceanside, which is San Diego. $100 for 25 gallons. A teenager can't afford that, let alone many adults. So no, we don't need to raise gas tax. But if you're looking at adding things like wanting to expand Medicare, wanting to focus on homelessness, wanting to cut prescription drug costs, which all sound phenomenal, does not belong in infrastructure. So if we keep whittling it down to focus strategically on roads, bridges, broadband, waterways, then I think we're going to come to an agreement. So it does seem like we're getting at least a little bit closer to that.
Tom, is getting to the point where we don't need a presidential historian or political historian to come on and see what's happening here. It doesn't look like they're going to come to agreement no matter what is in the future, reconciliation, things get passed that way. Do you see that happening, or do you see everyone finally coming together and saying, hey, this infrastructure bill looks good?
Sean, I don't see at this point an infrastructure bill moving forward because you have too many cooks in that kitchen. There's way too many proposals. Some of the Democrats, they want to change the United States from the land of the free to the land of the free stuff, with additions of Medicare benefits down to age 60. They want to give free college tuition for community college, free elder care, free child care. It's just endless. I can't see it coming together. And the idea that any Republican would sign on or even contemplate an increase in gas tax indexed to inflation. We know inflation is going up. To Amy's point, gas prices are already going through the roof. It is absolutely political suicide to go down that track of raising gas prices. And oh, by the way, they want to spend $80 billion to increase the IRS. One news story has up to 87,000 new IRS agents to chase Americans to pay tax. Hey, here's a novel idea. Why don't we just simplify the tax code and it'll be easier for people to pay their taxes? Only the government could come up with increasing the size of government as a way to cut costs. I don't get it.
Yeah. We'll wait and see again what President Biden will do. That's set to arrive on his desk today. Tom Borelli, Ruth Edmonds, and Amy Tarkanian. And if you guys don't mind, stick around. We've got another topic we'd like to discuss.
Yeah, this one a big one.
Violence across the country, 10 mass shootings resulting in at least 45 injured, 7 total dead. That was just, again, this past weekend's tally as crime continues to escalate.
Yeah, last weekend, look at this. There were also 10 mass shootings across 7 states that killed 12 people, injuring 57 more, as you see.
For a look at America's crime crisis, we want to welcome back in our panelists, Ruth Edmonds, Tom Borelli, Amy Tarkanian. And before we get our conversation started, I want to show you some of this data here. This in New York, but other cities experiencing similar statistics as well. Felony assaults up 27% this year over last year. The murder rate up about 71%. Overall crime up more than 27%. Ruth, start us off. What's going on here? What's to blame for this increase in violent crime?
You know, what we're seeing is that crime spikes and mass shootings happening in Democrat-run cities that have chosen to defund the police. Clearly, that strategy is not working. It is not a good idea to defund the police. And so we've got to get back to communities that support our men and our women in blue, because that's where we're going to have safe communities. That's where we're going to solve the problems. You know, I'm married to a former police officer, and so no one knows better and no one loves the blue better than I do. And we need police officers. We need them. We need safe communities. And so that's how we're going to solve the problem, not defunding police.
I'll go back to Tom Borelli on this one, too. New York City, obviously a heated mayoral race happening. They're on the campaign trail. I watched over the weekend. One of the candidates on there, she claims that she wants to take even more money from the NYPD. Is that the way to solve the crime? And I mean, we are just showing you the stats here, the rise in crime there alone in New York City. She wants to continue to take money, and we already know de Blasio, mayor of that city, of the city now, has already done so. It doesn't show a trend in working as we see the numbers on the screen. Why do we still see candidates pulling for more money to be pulled from the police?
Sean, it makes absolutely no sense at all. We already see the problems in New York City because of Mayor de Blasio. Now you have this candidate who just mentioned who's essentially doubling down on stupid. We certainly know what doesn't work. Removing police from the streets, cutting the budget, redirecting the budget of police, that doesn't work. Right now, unfortunately, in major cities, there's a war on police. We need a war on crime, and we need elected officials to follow that message. The American people around the country are suffering because of these horrible policies run by Democrats in these major cities.
Okay, well, let's talk about one in particular. New York mayoral candidate Andrew Yang, a Democrat. We might remember him from when he wanted to run for president as a Democrat. He was criticized most recently for how he answered a debate question about how he would handle the growing mental health crisis in New York City. Listen to what he had to say.
We're not talking about housing affordability. We're talking about the hundreds of mentally ill people we all see around us every day on the streets and the subways. We need to get them off of our streets and our subways into a better environment. And when you ask what I'm going to do differently, I'm going to rebuild the stock of psych beds in our city because the number's gone down 14%. It should be going up 100% until there are resources necessary for anyone who's mentally ill to not be on our streets.
New York City definitely dealing with a homeless crisis, quite frankly. Amy, could that be a solution? Should Andrew Yang be elected to serve as mayor?
Yes, he's actually correct. And to piggyback on what Tom said, they are doubling down on stupid, his other candidates that are running for this position, and Andrew Yang happens to be the only intelligent one in this topic. I have been in California on a regular basis, and they too are struggling from an enormous mental health decline, and homelessness rate is off the charts. So I have witnessed it. Also in Las Vegas, we have this very same problem. So guess what we should do? We should do maybe more social programs like Hope for Prisoners, where they actually assist in prisoners. It's a reentry program into the workforce, into their family structure, into community. So that way they can function like healthy human beings and get off the streets and not have this revolving door effect of where they're constantly working through their anger, their frustration, their hopelessness, their depression, because you cannot ignore facts and stats like you just listed and put on the screen. You cannot ignore those. So I don't know why Team Donkey, why they can't seem to wrap their head around this.
Yeah, well, the numbers don't lie. And of course, the mayoral primary again tomorrow. So we'll be watching that race very closely. Ruth Edmonds, Tom Borelli, Amy Tarkanian. Thank you, panelists.
South Florida mayor facing backlash for rushing too quickly to conclusions. This on a deadly crash at a pride parade in Fort Lauderdale. Our Miami correspondent Leonardo Feldman live with the latest. Good morning.
Good morning. That's right. The mayor of Fort Lauderdale, the Democratic mayor, Dean Trentalis, was at the scene of the Wilton Manors Pride Parade when it all unfolded, and he quickly rushed to judgment and declared it a hate crime. Let's listen to his words.
It's terrible. They're laying on the ground. This is clearly a terrorist act against the LGBT community. This is disgusting.
And after further investigation, authorities say it was just a tragic accident. 2 people were hit by the vehicle. One of them pronounced dead at the hospital. The driver, 77 years old, he is cooperating with the police after his negative DUI test. Fort Lauderdale's gay chorus confirming that the driver and the victims were all part of their group. And after this, at a vigil, the mayor saying he regrets his rush. Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz was at the scene, and she was just inches from being hit herself. Minutes after this all unfolded, the event was canceled. Back to you in the studio.
All right. Called it a hate crime. Clearly, officials said it was not. He had to retract his words. But again, just shows how dangerous it is to rush to judgment without waiting on the facts. Major story there out of Miami there, and a very sad one as we see how that one played out. Leonardo Feldman, thank you so much joining us live from Miami. We appreciate it.
Still ahead, a major victory against the Biden administration's ban on oil lease sales on public lands. Louisiana's Attorney General Jeff Land